Amara Johnson had long accepted that her life ran on two rhythms: work and Chloe. At 38, she wore her exhaustion like a second skin, the fine lines around her warm brown eyes a quiet testament to countless night shifts at the hospital. Still, there was a quiet pride in her steps. She had built a life for her daughter on her own terms, even if it meant coming home when the sun was already up, her body aching, and her black shoulder-length twists smelling faintly of antiseptic. Chloe was her reason. Every decision, every sacrifice, was for that 14-year-old girl with a light brown skin, neatly braided hair, and those big, curious eyes that saw the world in ways Amara had forgotten. It was Chloe's math grades that had started the worry. Numbers had never been her strongest suit, and Amara could see the frustration building in her daughter's once bright face whenever the subject came up. That's when she first heard about Dennis Cole, Mr. Cole, as the other parents respectfully called him. He was the name passed in hushed, approving tones at PTA meetings and school hallways. When Amara met him for the first time in the school's quiet faculty room, she noticed the details first. Tall, lean frame, pale complexion, the graying hair at his temples lending him an air of experience. His wire-rimmed glasses sat perfectly aligned. His crisp shirt and tie without a wrinkle. His handshake was warm but brief. His voice soft-spoken, each word deliberate, as if he were measuring its weight before releasing it. And when she mentioned Chloe's struggles, he leaned forward, not with impatience, but with an attentive calm that made her feel foolish for not finding him sooner. It didn't take long for Amara to notice changes. Chloe began returning from tutoring with fewer furrowed brows and more correct answers in her homework. She was even starting to solve problems without prompting. "She's catching on quickly," Mr. Cole had told her one evening. His smile restrained but approving. For Amara it was a relief. Relief that came with a quiet, almost guilty joy. Because 2 evenings a week she could rest, pay bills without distractions, or even just breathe. So she began leaving Chloe in his care, her trust growing with every glowing update. She told herself this was how you helped a child get ahead, by putting them in the hands of someone who knew better. Someone patient, someone safe. But even trust has shadows. There was that first time she noticed the classroom door click shut behind her as she left. "Just to avoid distractions," he had said lightly, the keys jingling as he locked it. And then the small candies he'd slipped to Chloe after a tough question, the kind you'd give to a much younger child. Strange maybe, but harmless, right? That evening, as the sun dipped low and the hallway lights cast a warm glow, Amara walked away from the classroom, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Behind her, the locked door muffled the quiet hum of voices inside. She didn't know it then, but something was already unfolding, something that would soon shatter the calm she thought she had built. It started slowly, almost too subtly for Amara to notice at first. Chloe wasn't the bubbly, talkative girl who used to fill the kitchen with stories about her classmates anymore. She still smiled, still did her chores, but the chatter that used to spill from her after school was fading into short, vague answers. When Amara asked about her day, Chloe would shrug, say, "It was fine," and retreat to her room. Amara told herself it was nothing serious. 14 was an age of closed doors and whispered secrets. Mood swings were part of the package. Then came the late-night texts from Mr. Cole. At first, they seemed professional. Brief updates on Chloe's progress, reminders about the next session. But gradually the tone shifted. "She's such a special girl," one message read, sent at 10:47 p.m. Another came just after midnight. "I can see so much potential in her, she just needs the right guidance." The words lingered in Amara's mind longer than she wanted to admit. They weren't exactly wrong, but they didn't feel like the kind of thing a tutor should be saying. Around the same time, Chloe started putting extra effort into her appearance on tutoring days. She'd spend more time in front of the mirror, carefully brushing her hair until each braid lay smooth and perfect. Her school uniform was always neatly pressed, her shoes polished. When Amara asked if she was trying to impress someone, Chloe would roll her eyes and mutter, "It's just school, Mom." But she wouldn't meet her gaze. Amara tried to remember what it felt like to be 14. The sudden self-awareness, the awkward transitions, the confusing emotions that came out of nowhere. Maybe Chloe was just growing up. Maybe she was just becoming more private, like Amara had been at that age. The thought was comforting and yet not entirely convincing. The little signs began to add up. Chloe would quickly lock her phone when Amara walked into the room, her thumb moving faster than instinct should allow. She flinched when the doorbell rang unexpectedly, as if sudden sounds had started to unsettle her. One overcast afternoon, Amara decided to pick Chloe up from tutoring early. The classroom door was slightly ajar, and she could hear the low hum of voices. Pushing it open, she froze. Mr. Cole was sitting far too close to her daughter, their chairs nearly touching. His hand rested on Chloe's shoulder, not guiding, not pointing, just there. Chloe's eyes were fixed on the desk, her body still. When they saw her, both jolted like guilty children caught in the middle of something. Mr. Cole was the first to recover, chuckling softly. "Oh, Mrs. Johnson," he said smoothly, removing his hand, "just helping her with her posture while writing. Kids these days hunch over their work so much." Amara forced her lips into a polite smile, but her chest tightened. She told herself not to overthink it. Still, as she walked them out, her gut whispered that something about this didn't feel right at all. Amara had always trusted her instincts, and lately they'd been whispering, no shouting, that something wasn't right. It started with the smallest reactions, the kind that could slip by unnoticed if you weren't paying attention. Whenever Mr. Cole's name came up, Chloe's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Her shoulders would stiffen, her lips press into a thin line. She didn't roll her eyes like a normal teenager avoiding a lecture. This was different. It was the quiet kind of tension, the kind that made Amara's pulse tick faster. One Saturday morning, while tidying Chloe's room, Amara noticed her math notebook lying half open on the bed. She picked it up, ready to admire her daughter's progress, but what she found stopped her cold. Between neatly written equations and solved problems were small sketches. Not faces, just hands. A man's hands, long and slender, holding a smaller pear. The detail was too deliberate, too intentional to be random doodling. Amara's chest tightened. That afternoon, she called her oldest friend, Latoya. Over coffee in Latoya's kitchen, Amara spilled everything. The late-night texts, the strange behavior, the drawings. Latoya's brow furrowed. "Listen," she said carefully. "I'm not saying ignore your gut, but you need to tread carefully. In towns like ours, one accusation can ruin lives. Yours, Chloe's, his. Make sure you know what you're dealing with before you make a move." It was sound advice, but it didn't quiet the unease. That evening, Amara sat on Chloe's bed, speaking gently, almost cautiously. "Is there something you want to tell me? Anything about Mr. Cole?" she asked. Chloe didn't look up from the book in her lap. "Nothing's wrong," she said flatly, turning a page without reading it. "Can we not talk about this?" And that was it. The conversation was shut down like a locked door. Hours later, as Amara passed by Chloe's room on her way to bed, she heard the low murmur of her voice. Pause. Chloe was on the phone whispering, "I'll try, but my mom's starting to suspect." The words were like a stone dropped into Amara's stomach. She stepped back quietly, her mind racing. The next tutoring day, Amara decided on a different plan. She dropped Chloe off as usual, smiling, pretending she had errands to run. Instead, she parked her car down the street, heart pounding as she crept toward the classroom. The door was cracked open just enough to see inside. Mr. Cole was leaning in, his face close to Chloe's, speaking in a low tone that carried an intimacy Amara didn't like. Chloe's head was down, nodding silently. Then Amara saw it. His hand resting on top of hers on the desk, still and deliberate. Not a guiding gesture. Not instructional. Just possession. Her breath caught. The hallway seemed to shrink around her, the walls pressing in. Every instinct in her body screamed the same thing. This was not normal. This was not okay. Something was very, very wrong. Amara woke up that morning with a decision carved deep in her chest. Today she was going to stop guessing. The sleepless nights, the uneasy glances, the hollow feeling in her gut every time she dropped Chloe off at that classroom. It had to end. She moved with quiet precision, sliding the small black voice recorder into the hidden pocket of Chloe's school bag. It was light enough that Chloe wouldn't notice, and discreet enough that no one else would either. All through the day, her mind buzzed with anticipation and dread. By evening, when Chloe returned home and tossed her bag in the corner, Amara felt her heartbeat in her ears. She waited until Chloe was in the shower, then pulled the recorder out with trembling fingers. Sitting alone in the kitchen, she pressed play. Mr. Cole's voice filled the room, smooth, deliberate. "You're mature beyond your years, Chloe. I can talk to you about things I can't tell other students." There was a pause then. "What we have is special. It's our little secret." Amara's grip on the recorder tightened until her knuckles whitened. Chloe's voice followed, small and hesitant. "But what if my mom finds out?" The answer came without hesitation, his tone firm but wrapped in sugar. "She won't unless you tell her. And if you do, she'll never let us see each other again. Is that what you want?" Her stomach twisted violently. It wasn't explicit, not the kind of thing you could throw at the police just yet, but it was enough to paint a sickening picture. She sat there for a long moment, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound, her hands shaking around the tiny device. When she finally went to Chloe's room, she tried to keep her voice steady. "Chloe, we need to talk about something I heard." But before she could explain, Chloe's eyes widened, shimmering with betrayal. "You spied on me," she choked out, tears welling fast. "Sweetheart, I just..." But Chloe didn't let her finish. She pushed past her, ran into her bedroom, and slammed the door so hard the walls rattled. The sound felt like it cracked something inside Amara. That night at the hospital, she wasn't herself. Her hands fumbled with medication labels. Her thoughts fogged over during patient rounds. Twice she had to recheck charts because she'd mixed up names. Every mistake felt like another warning. She couldn't keep living in this half-state of fear and second-guessing. By the next morning, she knew she had to act. She called the school and requested a meeting with the principal. But as she sat at the kitchen table, staring at the small recorder in her palm, the weight of the choice pressed hard. Playing that audio could open the door to answers, yes, but it could also shatter whatever fragile trust still existed between her and her daughter. She placed the recorder on the table, staring at it like it was a ticking bomb, unsure if pulling the pin would save Chloe, or lose her forever. The morning of the meeting, Amara could barely feel her legs as she walked into the school. The corridors felt longer than usual, the sound of her footsteps echoing faintly off the linoleum floors. Inside her bag, the voice recorder rested like a live grenade, silent but dangerous. Her mind spun with every possible outcome. The principal believing her, the principal dismissing her, Chloe hating her forever. She had run through all the scenarios in the shower, in the car, even while pouring her coffee, but none of them felt right. She reached the bench outside the principal's office, the fluorescent lights above flickering just enough to make her notice. Her fingers twisted in her lap as she tried to steady her breathing. That's when movement caught her eye down the hallway. Mr. Cole. He walked toward her with that same crisp, calculated stride, the faint scent of his cologne preceding him. And right beside him was Chloe. Amara's heart thudded painfully as their eyes met. For the briefest second, his expression shifted. Something hard and unyielding flashed in his gaze. Then, as quickly as it came, it was gone, replaced with a smooth, polite smile, the kind you might give a neighbor in passing. But it didn't reach his eyes. Chloe, on the other hand, looked like she hadn't slept. Her skin was pale, her braids slightly less neat than usual. Her gaze darted between her mother and her teacher, not landing anywhere for long. It wasn't defiance in her eyes. It was something else. Fear. Guilt. A silent plea. Before Amara could speak, the door to the principal's office opened. "Mrs. Johnson, we're ready for you," the secretary said warmly. She stood, her knees stiff, but just as she took a step toward the door, A hand gripped her arm. "Chloe." Her voice was a whisper so urgent it cut through the air. "Mom, please don't say anything. You don't understand." Amara froze, one foot in the doorway, one foot still in the hallway. Protect her daughter or expose the truth. The two choices pulled at her like opposing tides. Inside, the principal was waiting, looking up from a neatly arranged desk, eyebrows slightly raised as though expecting her to walk right in and start explaining. Amara's hand instinctively went to her bag. The recorder was still there, its weight pressing into the side of her palm. It felt heavier now, as though it knew it could change everything. Her mouth opened, the words gathering on her tongue, when she felt the buzz in her pocket. She slipped her hand inside and pulled out her phone. One new message. No name, just a number she didn't recognize. "If you value your daughter's future, keep quiet." Her breath caught. The words on the screen blurred for a second as her pulse roared in her ears. She looked at Chloe. She looked at Mr. Cole. And she realized, with a sinking in her gut, that she was no longer the only one who knew. To be continued. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next part of this story.